Hey there, welcome to the Luxious. Today we are here with yet another riveting topic. Have you ever wondered what the 10 most expensive cities in the world to live in are? Well, wonder no more because you have us to set the record straight. In 2020, the most expensive cities to live in around the world have been revealed in the 16th annual Demographia International Housing Affordability Survey. Ain't that a mouthful? The study analyzed a total of 309 housing markets in 8 countries: Australia, Canada, Hong Kong, Ireland, New Zealand, Singapore, the UK, and the US. To produce the ranking, it looked at data from the third quarter of 2019 using the mean multiple approach, which is the median house price divided by the median household income. According to the ranking, the more points a city has, the more expensive it is to live in. The survey shows that the most severely unaffordable major housing markets are currently in Australia, Canada, China, and New Zealand, which has been the case for a number of years, including last year's report. We start at number 10 with London. Any resident can tell you how expensive it is to live in the capital of the United Kingdom. According to the data, it's the most expensive city in Europe. London is one of the largest and most influential cities in the world, historically playing a central role in fashion, industry, finance, as well as being a global cultural center. It's also one of the most expensive cities in the world, measured in terms of absolute cost or general affordability. The city is a hotspot for professionals and artisans and boasts strong wages. In fact, average wages in London are the highest in the UK and are very competitive with any city in Europe. If an individual is able to find an affordable living space, London might even prove to be comparatively cheaper than many other urban settings due to the high average wages. Unfortunately, finding an affordable place to live in London isn't easy. Outside of housing costs, London also ranks high in terms of food, clothing, and transportation costs. Affordability ultimately comes down to income and lifestyle. It makes an enormous difference whether an individual is a student or an established professional. And retirees face different costs than workers in their 20s and 30s. London is never going to be mistaken for a cheap city, but expenses are relative depending on personal circumstances. Housing costs are normally one of, if not the largest expense in any budget. This is particularly true in London, where 2-bedroom apartments in the city centre cost a median of around $2,500 per month. Things get less expensive as you move away from the financial district, with prices dropping to as low as $1,400 per month. Food markets and restaurants can be pricey in the city, with milk prices as high as $5.90 a gallon. And some cheeses cost around $7 per pound, which is higher than some American cities and lower than others. Cigarettes average around $14 per pack. Other market prices are commensurate with costs in major US settings, such as Miami, Chicago, or Denver. London is home to a huge number of restaurants, both fine dining and casual. A nice 3-course meal might cost between $52 and $104 without alcohol. But you can still grab a cheeseburger combo at McDonald's for around $7. Coffee prices range between $3 and $6 for a cappuccino, and the average pint of beer is available for around $7. A monthly pass for public transportation, the most common method of travel in the city, is about $190 for just zones 1 to 2, which encompasses most of central London. Taxis cost about $6 per mile with normal rates. If you drive your own vehicle, you can expect gasoline prices north of $6 per gallon, depending on the market. San Francisco is widely regarded as one of the most desirable cities in the US. The scenery is breathtaking, the weather is mild year-round, and the people are as diverse as in any place in America. The downside to a move to the Bay Area, though, is that it is one of the most expensive places to live in the US. Rent, transportation, and even food cost significantly more in San Francisco than in other locations. If you're considering a move to San Francisco, the following information breaks down the average costs of various necessities in the city to help you estimate the income you need to live there as a student, a professional, or an unemployed job seeker. Because the cost of living varies widely from one part of town to another, and because every resident has a unique set of circumstances, you may have to adjust these figures to determine the specific amount of money you will need. Rents in San Francisco have climbed rapidly. As of January 2020, a one-bedroom apartment in the city rents for around $3,500, while the median across all homes is $4,300. For someone moving from a less expensive part of the country, such as the South or the Midwest, this figure may invoke shock or outright fear. After all, in cities such as Cincinnati or Memphis, a $3,500 per month income would provide a comfortable home with a yard, pay for necessities, and still leave you with some pocket money. The good news is the $3,500 is the median. There are some extravagantly wealthy areas of town where rents are $10,000 per month or higher. But there are also areas with rentals well under $3,500. Ahead of Bay Area neighbor San Francisco, San Jose's 2020 ranking is actually down 2 spots from 6th in 2019. And its overall score declined from 9.4 in 2019 to 8.5 in 2020. Yet, it remains the second most expensive city in the US to live in. The cost of food is important as we all have to eat. There are ways to save money on your food expenses if you plan carefully. Check out stores like Walmart or Costco to buy items in bulk at a considerable savings. At different times of the year, you can get local produce for low prices at roadside stands or farmers markets. By far New Zealand's largest city, Auckland's overall score of 8.6 was down from 9.0 in 2019. But it still rose 2 spots from 9th in 2019 to 7th in 2020. Nonetheless, the best thing about Auckland is its diversity. There are over 200 different ethnic communities that call this city their home, and over a third of all people living here were born overseas. Auckland is the economic powerhouse of New Zealand. It is the nation's largest city, home to a third of the population, and contributes 38% of the nation's GDP. The city's economy has seen 5 years of consecutive growth and is internationally connected, serving as a gateway to New Zealand and the markets of the Asia-Pacific region. Auckland is ranked the 3rd most livable city in the world according to the Mercer Quality Living Survey of 2019. The living costs that accompany the desirability of this rapidly growing cosmopolitan hub are at a level you would expect. You may find some services and everyday items to be more expensive than your home country though. But overall, Auckland fares are quite justifiable if you see the standard of living here. Next on our list is Toronto, Canada. It didn't even appear in the top 10 last year. But its score of 8.6 makes it not only the 2nd most expensive city to live in Canada, but the 3rd most expensive in the Western Hemisphere. The average cost of a one-bedroom rental unit in Toronto was over $2,300 per month as of November 2019. Most landlords now require renters to purchase tenant insurance. And insurance for a one-bedroom unit in Toronto's Bloor Court neighborhood would cost around $35 per month. In total, the monthly housing costs for Toronto renters in 2020, including tenant insurance, comes to $2,349, up to $69 from 2019. Compared to 2019's fare options, Toronto Transit Commission prices are higher across the board in 2020, with a 12-month adult Presto Pass costing $138.55 per month. The raised prices for fares can be attributed to the full implementation of the Presto system across the TDC. For those who rely on ride-sharing services, there are many options to choose from in Toronto. Whether using taxis, Uber or Lyft, this method of transportation is extremely popular in the city. According to Statistics Canada, Torontonians aged 18 and over spent a collective $241 million on ride-sharing services in 2016. A Torontonian who buys a 12-month adult Presto Pass, in addition to taking 4 $30 Uber trips per month, would spend a total of $258 a month in transportation costs. People today are increasingly relying on food delivery apps such as Skip the Dishes and Uber Eats, which has caused grocery costs to decrease for people in Toronto. The average Torontonian spends nearly $252 a month on groceries. In addition to paying for groceries, lowest-rates.ca estimates that Torontonians spend approximately $282 monthly on dining out and ordering takeout. As the second largest city in the US, Los Angeles attracts residents from across the country and around the globe. As the epicenter of the multi-billion-dollar entertainment industry, the city is a magnet for aspiring actors, directors, and screenwriters. With idyllic weather year-round, beautiful beaches, and a diversity of scenery, it is possible during some months for an Angelino to snow ski in the morning and surf in the afternoon. Los Angeles, California's cost of living is 43% higher than the national average, while the housing expenses are 127% higher than the national average and the utility prices are 8% higher than the national average. Transportation expenses like bus fares and gas prices are 31% higher than the national average. On fourth on our list, we have the beautiful city of Melbourne, or as Australians like to call it, Melbourne. In 2019, Melbourne was also ranked as the fourth most expensive city in the world to live in. This year, the Australian city's overall score is down by 0.2% to 9.5. The biggest outlay for expats in Melbourne will be the cost of accommodation. Rental places near the city centre can be particularly high. As with most cities, the further outside of the city one lives, the more money one can save. But there are nonetheless some hotspots with high prices, even an hour or more outside of the Melbourne's main centre of activity. To get around in the city, most people find public transport to be the cheapest and most convenient option. To avoid traffic jams, high parking fees, and fluctuating fuel prices, it's not uncommon for city-dwelling expats to avoid a car altogether. Third on this list is Sydney, which was the most expensive city in the Southern Hemisphere to live in last year. Sydney, the largest city in Australia and the wider Australasia region, still has a score in the double digits, though it's down 0.7 points from its 2019 score of 11.7. Housing is easily the biggest expense living in Sydney. By comparison, housing in Melbourne is 24% cheaper than in Sydney. The average rent in an expensive area is around $3,400, and utilities per month are almost 50% cheaper in Melbourne than in Sydney. If you drive in Sydney, a standard car is likely to set you back around $25,000, which is very similar to other major cities like Melbourne. Fuel costs work at around 1.52 a litre, while public transport is more expensive than most other cities in Australia, $172 a month to be precise. In comparison to Melbourne, Sydney fares quite well in terms of food and drink costs. While milk costs a little more, lunches, fast food restaurants, and domestic beer is cheaper. In fact, beer in the supermarket is 17% cheaper in Sydney than in Melbourne. Crikey! The most expensive city to live in North America and the Western Hemisphere, Vancouver, has a score of 11.9, which is actually down from 12.6 in 2019. Everyone has heard of this fabulous place in southwestern Canada. And despite the cost of living in Vancouver, half the world wants to live here. From the snow-capped mountains to the crystal clear waters surrounding the city, Vancouver is simply a visual paradise. The old maxim of being able to ski in the morning and swim in the ocean in the afternoon is actually true in Vancouver, although you might find the water a bit colder than you expected. All the beauty comes at a price though. Just like New York and San Francisco in the US, Vancouver is one of the most expensive cities in North America. However, I won't blame you if you brush the high cost of living in Vancouver aside once you get here. Living in Vancouver is addictive, and once you get here, you won't want to leave. Most young people living in the city center rent, with many choosing to live with roommates for years beyond the usual early 20s timeline. An average one-bedroom apartment in the city can range from $1,900 to $3,000 per month, with the two-bedroom averaging $2,500 to $3,500 per month. Housing costs may be your biggest budget line item when you live in Vancouver. With the relatively recent boom in the housing market, most millennials fear they won't be able to buy a home in the city they grew up in. Many homeowners develop secondary suites in the basements into rentals. These basement apartments can sometimes be had for 20 to 30% less depending on the area. Renters of a two-bedroom apartment can expect to pay $120 to $150 per month in utilities. This would include heating, gas, and electricity. Monthly internet would add $60 to $70. If you haven't yet cut your cable, expect to pay $50 to $150 per month for the privilege, depending on the depth of your sports obsession. Homeowners pay additional utilities including water and garbage pickup. That works out to another $70 per month. If you own an apartment, monthly maintenance fees add $400 to $500 to your regular expenses. A monthly pass on Metro Vancouver, one zone transit pass in Vancouver will cost you around $109 per month, with pay-as-you-go pricing at $2.95 per ride. If you're driving, gas prices at the present time are $1.30 per liter. But this price is wildly variable and has recently been as high as $1.60 per liter. And drumroll please, because the most expensive city in the world to live in is Hong Kong. Hong Kong's score of 20.8 was down from 20.9 in 2019, but it's still about 9 points higher than anywhere else. You should plan to spend around $140 per day on your vacation in Hong Kong, which is the average daily price based on the expenses of other visitors. Now, past travelers have spent on average $26 on meal for one day and $7.04 on local transportation. Also, the average hotel price in Hong Kong for a couple is $124. So, a trip to Hong Kong for two people for 1 week costs on average around $2,000. Salary levels in Hong Kong are in general very good. Many roles offer top-tier average salaries, and Hong Kong is also home to the best-paid attorneys, QA engineers, product managers, hardware engineers, and industrial designers on the planet. The amount you pay in rent is a big driver of your overall cost of living. Central areas of Hong Kong have some of the most expensive rents in the world, with apartments typically very small. If you're on a budget, consider life in the areas outside of the city center. The good thing is that public transport is quite cheap in the country. By contrast, owning and maintaining a car in Hong Kong is very expensive. And most people find that they don't need one if they live centrally. Plus, the cost and risk of bumping into erratic taxi drivers is generally not worth it. And there you have it, guys. Hope that you liked the video and found it helpful. If you like our channel, don't forget to subscribe and click the bell icon so you get notified whenever we upload our next video. Your valuable suggestions are very important to us, so do post them in the comment section.